So, you guys might have heard this term bridge course before also. After your 10th standard, before entering to your plus 1 and plus 2, that means before entering into your entrance field, you guys might have got a bridge course. That means it's just an introduction to your higher secondary education. Okay, that's the basic fundamental meaning of bridge course. But I have never heard a bridge course for MBBS. But I think this is the place where it is required the most, because actually your higher secondary education is actually a continuation of your high school education. You are learning about motion, and you are learning about Newton's laws of motion, you are learning about chemistry, you are learning about the periodic table, all in your high school education also. And in higher secondary education, it's actually the continuation of these laws of motion, continuation of periodic table and all. Even in biology, you have learned about the cells, you have learned about organelles in your high school education itself. So it's actually a continuation, and a bridge course there actually plays a minor role. But here, the terminologies you are going to learn, or the subjects you are going to learn, is entirely different. In your first year MBBS, there are mainly 3 subjects. First one is anatomy, second one is physiology, and third one is biochemistry. Okay, so these 3 subjects are completely new for you. And the terminologies or the way of studying here will be entirely different. So I feel that a bridge course or an introduction to MBBS course is essential for every student before actually entering to the proper first year MBBS course. So that's our purpose here. So let's start, guys. So I would like to welcome each and every one of you to the world of medicine once again. So when I was a first year student, I had many obstacles pursuing the course. Because this actually, first of all, let me say, I'm not a biology type of guy. Okay, I loved physics and maths. I was actually not a person who loved studying biology. And therefore, I faced problems which were more severe than my peer group. Actually, my friends who were actually interested in biology might have found it more easier. But for me, pursuing the first year MBBS course was extremely tough. So I still remember I complained to my parents that I'm going to stop the course and all, because I was not able to study. That was simply because I didn't have the basic knowledge of anatomy. That's why I was not able to study it. So after this bridge course, each and every one of you should have the fundamentals of anatomy, physiology and biochemistry, so that your first year MBBS is going to be easy. That's our sole purpose of this bridge course. Okay, so let's reassess ourselves after this bridge course, whether you have gained that basic knowledge. And I'm pretty sure, I'm 100% confident that this bridge course is going to help you, because I'm going to introduce you to each and every new terminologies you are going to hear when you enter the medical college. Okay, so as I have already mentioned, it's a drastic change. I have already mentioned that you have been studying laws of motion, you have been studying periodic table, you have been studying about cells and all in your high school education, and actually in your higher secondary education, it's just a continuation. But here it's different. Okay, your pattern of studying is different, your pattern of exam writing is different, your entire curriculum is different. So there is definitely a gap between plus 2 and MBBS. There is definitely a gap between your plus 2 or your 12th and MBBS, and our purpose is to fill the gap. Okay, so we are going to connect the NCERT. We are going to connect what all you have studied in your higher secondary education to what you are going to study in your first year MBBS. That's our purpose here. Okay, so let's start, guys. Let's start. So before starting, I would like to just let you know that this is the recorded session of this bridge course. After this recorded session, we will be having a live discussion also. We will be having 2 to 3 sessions of live discussion where we can clarify your doubt. This is just a recorded session. This is the basics of first year MBBS. Okay. And after this, if you guys have any doubt, or if you want me to discuss any particular topic more elaborately, we'll be doing that in the coming live sessions also. So stay tuned. So I have told you that this is there is a drastic change between your higher secondary education and your first year MBBS. But still there are connections. That's why before entering to MBBS, your pre-medical entrance or your NEET entrance concentrates on these 4 subjects, because essentially these forms the basics of what you're going to study, but just in a different way. So I would like to just highlight those important topics which you have already studied in your higher secondary education, that is going to help you in your first year MBBS study. Okay. So let's start with physics, because botany and zoology, and especially zoology, you guys all know that zoology is absolutely essential for studying MBBS, because MBBS is what is the full form of MBBS? It's Bachelor of Medicine and Bachelor of Surgery, right? So here you are studying about the basic anatomy and physiology in the first year, and you have already studied about human physiology. There is an entire unit in your biology NCERT which deals with human physiology. So you have well and good with human physiology. Here we are going to study physiology as a separate subject. So my point is, zoology is important for MBBS, every one of us know that. But how is physics, chemistry and botany important? I'll just explain. So there are certain laws. So in your fluid mechanics, so let's start with physics. So in physics, when you studied mechanics of fluids, there is many theories of fluid flowing. There is laminar flow, turbulent flow. You have already learned all those terms and you know very well about fluid mechanics. So there is something called Poisson's law of resistance, which actually it's an equation where it relates, it's a relation where we get pi p r raised to 4 by a theta l. Okay, so this shows how the rate of flow in a fluid is related to the radius, the length of the tube, the pressure, the coefficient of viscosity and all. So it's basically a equation from physics, but you need this equation in studying your first year MBBS. In your first year physiology, you're going to learn how the turbulent flow and laminar flow in blood vessels. So we know that blood flows through the blood vessels, and it can be a laminar flow or it can be a turbulent flow if there is some obstruction. So there we use this equation to derive the rate of flow in a blood vessel. We use this equation, which is Poisson's law for resistance. So physics is also important. My just point here is that physics is also going to help you in your first year MBBS, all throughout the MBBS. Okay, now the next one is optics. So in your anatomy lab or in your physiology lab, you're going to use your microscope, and you know that microscope basically works on the principle of optics. So you know that microscope, you have learned about ray optics very well detailed in your higher secondary education. So you know that both microscope and telescope works on the principle of optics. So the principle of optics is again going to help you studying MBBS. And the third one is Nernst equation. Nernst equation for RMP. RMP means resting membrane potential. You have learned about the terms membrane potential and action potential and all in your neural control and coordination, in the chapter called neural control and coordination. You know that what's a resting membrane potential, how a action potential is formed, you know all those things. So there is an equation for membrane potential that is called Nernst equation. So again, going back to NCERT, in your chapter called electrochemistry, in the chemistry, you have learned how to calculate the EMF or how to calculate the voltage of a cell. You know that, you're good with that. So a similar equation you are again going to learn for Nernst equation. A similar equation you are again going to learn, which is called the Nernst equation, and which is used to calculate the resting membrane potential. So these are just the topics from physics that comes in your first year MBBS. Okay, I have not mentioned each and every one of them. These are the topics of physics which comes in your first year MBBS. If we take second, third and final year, there are many topics that's going to come from physics, chemistry and all. So that's the importance of physics. So now let's come on to chemistry. So you know that chemistry is extremely important in learning MBBS, because one of your first year subject, its name itself is biochemistry, which means it comprises the concepts of both biology and chemistry. And already you have got an introduction to biochemistry in your higher secondary education itself. Like you have studied biochemistry, you have studied about biomolecules. So what you are going to study in the subject biochemistry is detailed about these biomolecules. You are going to learn about carbohydrates, you are going to learn about proteins, and you are going to learn about lipids, you are going to learn about nucleic acids. I know you have learned about this in your higher secondary education, but here you are going to learn about it in detail. Your carbohydrate itself will be a separate 4 or 5 chapters. Protein will be a 4 or 5 chapters. Genetics will be another 4 or 5 chapters. Okay. So chemistry is extremely important. And the next important thing here is chemical kinetics. You have learned about chemical kinetics, you have learned about zero order reaction, you have learned about first order reaction, and you need that here again in your first year and in your second year also, in your pharmacology also. You need chemical kinetics, you need to know the half-life, you need to know the equation for half-life, you need to know about first order reaction, you need to know about zero order reaction. These are extremely important, and the questions regarding first order, zero order reactions and half-life is being repeatedly asked in the NEET PG also. So chemical kinetics is also important for your MBBS course. And speaking about organic chemistry, I don't think I need to emphasize it specifically, because organic chemistry, the word organic chemistry itself means the chemistry of those materials which are organics. That means chemistry of living materials. That's what organic chemistry is. So with the MBBS is the study of living materials, basically it's study of human beings, and therefore organic chemistry is going to play an extra important role here. And about practical chemistry, we have spoke about organic chemistry, and speaking about practical chemistry, you have done certain experiments in your laboratories in your +1 and +2 chemistry lab, right? So you know how to use a burette, you know how to use a pipette, you know how to do certain reactions, like you have done certain salt identification reactions and all in your chemistry lab. Similar to the lab, in your biochemistry lab, what you're going to do is you're going to detect the presence of glucose, you're going to detect the presence of protein, you're going to detect the presence of ketones and all. For this, you need to know what you have studied in your +1 and +2 practical chemistry. So it's again going to be a continuation. So that's about chemistry. Now coming about botany, I know you will be thinking that zoology is extremely essential for studying MBBS, but what's the significance of botany here? Botany has also got significance, especially the chapter respiration. You have learned the chapter respiration in plants, where you learn about glycolysis, Krebs cycle and all, and you also have learned photosynthesis, where you have studied about ATP, how ATP is used to for the cell to function and all. So this you are going to study again. You are going to study in detail every step of glycolysis, gluconeogenesis, glycogenolysis, protein synthesis, protein metabolism, fatty acid synthesis, cholesterol metabolism, you have nucleic acid synthesis. You are going to learn each and every one of these cycles, and that too in detail. You are going to learn enzyme in each and every one of these steps. So what you have learned you know the steps of glycolysis, you know the steps of Krebs cycle, you have learned in your +2 biology, but you are going to study it in detail in your first year MBBS. So those concepts will also help you in pursuing your first year MBBS. Now about biotechnology. In biotechnology, you have learned about certain methods, how to use these biological molecules. You have learned about PCR, that is polymerase chain reaction. You have learned about nucleic acid amplification. You have learned about how to use restriction endonucleases, what they do. So these all topics we are actually practicing. For example, polymerase chain reaction. You know that there are certain infections. For example, there is something called COVID, which we had a COVID outbreak in 2019. So how do we detect COVID virus? It's actually RT-PCR. RT means reverse transcriptase polymerase chain reaction. So what we are practicing in our daily life, when I'm actually someone who is studying to become a physician, so what we are practicing in our laboratories is what you have learned in your higher secondary education. We are practicing PCR, so you need to know how to do PCR in detail, that we are going to again study in your first year MBBS. So you have also studied a chapter called microbes in human welfare. In this chapter, you have learned how microbes help in human welfare, right? So you will be again studying this in detail in subject microbiology. Okay, so in your second year MBBS, you will be having a subject called microbiology, where you will be again studying each and every microbes in detail. So that's about botany. Now coming on to zoology, I don't think I need to explain the importance of zoology in studying MBBS, because zoology, actually MBBS is just extension of zoology. In zoology, we are studying about all animals. In MBBS, we are studying about a single animal, that is human, right? So you have studied a separate unit called human physiology in your higher secondary education, right? So human physiology, of this physiology is again one of your subject to study in your first year MBBS. So we have biochemistry, we have physiology, and we have anatomy. These three makes your first year MBBS subjects. So human physiology, you have studied a unit in your higher secondary education. Here you are going to study it as a separate subject. Okay, so here you will be knowing the different systems, about our different systems in body, how the human physiology works, how the different system, how cardiovascular system works, how our nervous system works, how the renal system works, how gastrointestinal system works, how our reproductive system works, how our endocrinology system works. Okay, so you are going to study each and every system in detail in physiology. And also you have learned about cell, right? You have learned about cell, you have learned about the organelles, you have learned about the cell cycle, right? So we'll be learning it again in detail here. And finally, about genetics. Genetics, you have two important chapters. You have principles of inheritance and variation, and you have molecular basis of genetics. So genetics, again, it's a separate chapter. Genetics, it's a separate unit. You will be learning genetics mainly in two subjects. One is biochemistry, and second one is, it's in the second year you will be learning genetics again in pathology. So these two subjects, actually a part of genetics comes in each and every one of your subjects, but mainly genetics is going to be there in two subjects. First one is your biochemistry and second one is your pathology. So my purpose of this slide was just to describe you that what you're going to study in MBBS, it's not something new. What you're going to study is just the continuation of what you have already studied in your higher secondary education, but just in an elaborate way and in a different way of learning. Okay, so I hope how you guys have understood how your higher secondary subjects are related to your MBBS subjects. And one point I would like to emphasize here is that what I'm going to discuss in this coming few hours, there is nothing that here you should learn by heart. Okay, these are just the base I've mentioned before. These are just the basic concepts. So you guys just try to imbibe that concepts. No one is going to ask this. Okay, in your exams, no one is going to ask these questions. That means what all topics you have studied, what all topics are common in higher secondary education and your MBBS course. No one is going to ask that question. But I would like to as I mentioned before, I would like to just fill the gap between these +2 and MBBS. Okay, so these are all the concepts. You don't need to by heart any definitions here. Just try to understand the concepts. Okay, so let's continue. So when we move from NCERT to MBBS, there are certain changes in your pattern of study that you should make, because we are conditioned to prepare for entrance examination or board examination. But in MBBS, it's going to be something different. Okay, so since we have prepared for entrance examination, you know that NEET is one of the most competitive examination and you have cracked it. So for cracking NEET, we need to learn every word by word in your NCERT. Okay, and there it is possible, and there it is essential also. For cracking NEET, it is essential. You need to know every word of NCERT. But here things are different, because it's such a vast subject that you cannot learn every word by word in your MBBS subjects. You cannot learn every word, every sentence or every word in your textbook. Here what you need to know is the outlook of that disease, or you need to know the most important things of that disease. Okay, so you need to prioritize while reading. You need to prioritize which all topics are important, or which all topics are going to be asked in the exam, or which all topics I need to know to practice as a clinician. Okay, so how to understand which all topics are important, that I'll mention in the coming slides. Okay, that I'll mention in the coming slides. And whenever and as you go through your first year MBBS, slowly over a few months or a few weeks, you itself will understand that which all topics are important. You will gain that skill to know which all topics are important. So my point here is, you have to change your pattern. There is a book called Cunningham. This I'll be detailing about that book and all in the coming slides, but just for introduction, I would like to say that there is a book called Cunningham. This book is actually a practical book for dissection in anatomy. Okay, you might know what is dissection. We'll be having a cadaver, like we call the dead bodies. We know in first year anatomy, we have to dissect the dead bodies, and with respect, we call these dead bodies as cadaver. We never call them dead body. We have to respect it and we call it a cadaver. Okay, so to dissect a cadaver, we have certain instructions given by the book called Cunningham, and you are not conditioned with, no one of us, okay, no one of us are conditioned to read a complicated book. Actually, it's not a complicated book, it's a beautiful book, but as far as a first year medico is concerned, Cunningham's language is a bit difficult. Okay, it's not that you can understand every word by reading Cunningham. It will be difficult because many of the terminologies will be new. Okay, so if you start reading Cunningham word by word, or if you start studying Cunningham word by word, you could not study more than 3 pages or 2 pages in a day, because every word will be new for you. So my point here is that you have to change your way of studying. You need to understand the concepts and you need to move on. It's not like I will remember every single word from that book. Okay, I'll come to that point in detail later. So my second point here is that studying everything is not possible. Since you have prepared for, since you have cracked the most competitive exam, you have learned almost everything in your higher secondary education. But things are different here again, because no one can study everything in medicine, because it's so vast, and it's so vast that new studies are going now on, new trials are going, new experiments are going on. So it's, no one can say that I have learned everything in medicine. It's not possible. So here what we study is, we study the most clinical ones. We study those topics which are going to be asked in the exam. We study those topics which is essential for me to know, to treat a patient. Okay, it's not possible to read everything, or it's not possible to study everything. So we are studying only the important things. Okay, and as you pass on to your next year, as you pass on to from first year to second year, you are going to update. So we'll be studying something, new every day. That's, we are going to increase our knowledge. We are going to increase our knowledge to the maximum limit. We are going to push our limits, but it's not possible to learn everything for an individual. Okay, because the syllabus is going to be so vast. Now my third point here is the pattern of exam writing is also different. Okay, your pattern of exam writing is also different. You have prepared for a competitive exam, you have prepared for MCQ based exam, and also you have written theory or descriptive exam in your higher secondary education also. So you know how to write a descriptive exam, and you know how to write an MCQ exam. And according to the updated CBME curriculum, you will be having both. You will be having a few MCQs also, and mainly you will be having descriptive questions. You will be having long essays, you will be having short essays, and you will be having short notes. So the pattern of writing is also different, and for each subject that is different. For anatomy, you will be having certain subheadings. That means you will be having headings called relations, you will be having headings called clinical anatomy, you will be having headings called radiological anatomy. I'll discuss each and every one of them in the coming slides. Just be sensitized with these terms. So just know that your pattern of exam writing is also going to be different, and we'll be discussing that also. And most importantly, don't expect marks as high as your board exams. I don't want to say that you are not going to get good marks, but don't expect as high as your board exams. That means many of you might have scored full mark in your board exams, right? If you are following the state syllabus, many of you have scored 1200 of 1200 in your both 11th and 12th. But it's not possible to score that high marks in your MBBS, because the subject here is tough, and valuation is also going to be more tougher. So you will be getting, you can score 80%. If your is performing excellent, you can score 90% and all. But you're never going to score 100% here, because your subject is a little more tougher, and valuation is also tougher. I want to emphasize this point because many students couldn't take it in first year, because all of you have been your toppers in your schools, right? That's why you have cracked MBBS. So all of you might be students with exceptional IQs, all of you might be the intelligent student in your school. But when you come to MBBS, you are not going to get that marks, and understand that it is normal. Okay, it is normal for everyone. It is not that your brain has suddenly shrunken away. Okay, you have the same IQ itself. It's just that the way of syllabus or way of teaching here is different. That's why you are not getting mark as high as your board exams, but still try to score the maximum. I can assure you, if you prepare very well, you can score 90% or above in your MBBS also. Okay. So now let's discuss about the CBME curriculum. So actually, CBME curriculum is the updated curriculum. Actually, in my times, I'm actually a 2014 admission in MBBS, and I actually passed in 2020. Like, my internship was also finished in 2020. So My curriculum was not CBME. CBME is a new curriculum for the MBBS, for Indian medical graduates. CBME is their new curriculum. So I'll be just discussing about CBME in the coming few slides. Okay,